Mother announced my fake pregnancy at Thanksgiving dinner, so I exposed my real cancer scare and upcoming surgery, leaving everyone silent. To preface this, my mom and I have a good relationship, but there's one thing that really gets under my skin. She cannot resist sharing any and all news about my life, despite my repeated pleas for privacy. I don't enjoy having my life treated like a juicy neighborhood topic, and I find it unsettling when people I barely know, my mom's friends or coworkers, come up to me in public and start asking about things I never told them myself. And these aren't trivial updates like a new hobby or a vacation plan. These are major, deeply personal things that I'd prefer to keep to myself. I remember it starting pretty young. When I was 11 and got my first period, she blasted it on Facebook for all to see. That was mortifying. Suddenly, every family friend and distant cousin knew before I could even adjust to the idea myself. After that, I withdrew from telling her about anything significant in my life, which, as you'd expect, only made it harder for us to connect authentically. But the habit never faded. When I got into the college of my dreams, I barely had time to process the acceptance before she spread the news far and wide. When I got engaged, the same thing happened. She told everyone before I had the chance. She even announced our wedding date before invitations left my hands. My husband, bless him, takes my side every time I ask her to stop. We want to confide in her, to keep her close, but she seems completely unable to contain her excitement. It's driving us both crazy. Here's more context. I'm 24 and my husband is 24, too. We've been together for 6 years, met in college, hit it off instantly, dated for 4 years, and married for the last 2. From the start, we agreed our focus would be on our education and building our careers, not on having kids. Neither of us sees children in our future, and nothing's changed that in 6 years, regardless of how many people insist we'll catch baby fever as our friends start families. My husband has 5 siblings, all with kids of their own, and not once have we reconsidered. My mom, though, insists we'll change our minds. She's relentlessly clear she wants to be a grandmother. I understand her longing. I'm her only child and the last of her family. When my dad died in a car accident when I was 6, it was just us. She had wanted more children after me, but life didn't allow it, and as a result, she poured everything into raising me. Still, no matter how often I gently remind her that children aren't in the cards, she turns every little headache or complaint I have into maybe you're pregnant. It's her go-to explanation. But I'm not pregnant. My husband and I are extremely careful, and I've never even had a scare. This past summer, though, something felt different. It started with missed periods, but the pregnancy tests came up negative, 3 in a row. I spotted a little belly forming, even though I hadn't changed my diet or exercise. I was exhausted all the time, achy, and felt perpetually feverish. My husband and I agreed, I needed to see my doctor. I booked an appointment in early November, explained all the symptoms, and insisted I was not pregnant. My doctor agreed and ran a blood test to rule it out. Result, not pregnant. Then my doctor and gynecologist scheduled an ultrasound, suspecting something else was off. That's when they discovered a massive fibroid tumor in my uterus, about the size of a softball, blocking my pelvis and trapping my period inside me. Surgery was necessary to remove it, but I'd have to wait a few weeks. The operation got scheduled for November 29th, and I'm relieved to say I came through it fine. Now I'm recovering in bed with my husband at my side, grateful for his endless support. But before surgery, since it hadn't happened before Thanksgiving and I was grounded from work travel, I went home to my mom's for the holiday. That meant running errands and prepping Thanksgiving dinner together, a tradition I do enjoy. Mom, on seeing my growing belly, immediately lit up with "I'm going to be a grandma" energy. She tried dragging me to the baby section at the store, even though I loudly, repeatedly insisted I was not pregnant. It took several frustrated refusals before she backed down. I told her I was dealing with something personal, and we'd wait until after Thanksgiving to share any news. I didn't want to bring gloom to a family celebration. But she kept pressing, demanding to know the real story. Because of her history with oversharing, I refused to cave. Again, I reminded her, after Thanksgiving, I'd talk. I thought that was the end of it. Until Thanksgiving dinner arrived. There we all were, family around the table, laughter in the air, food everywhere. I was barely eating and, for obvious reasons, skipping the wine. To my mother, even these were clues, more pregnancy symptoms. She wouldn't let it go, nudging me with knowing glances and comments. I finally put my hand on hers, locked eyes, and told her again, loudly enough for the table to notice, that I wasn't pregnant. She just smiled like she knew a secret, convinced I was just playing coy. Then, dessert time rolled around. It's a family tradition to go around the table and announce what we're thankful for each Thanksgiving, and as that moment came, she looked at me with a familiar glint in her eye. And then, as everyone waited their turn, she cleared her throat, beamed at me and, as we gathered for the family dinner, emotions were already running high for me. For days, my mother kept hinting to everyone that I was pregnant, no matter how many times I insisted otherwise. She wouldn't drop it, no matter how firmly I denied it or explained to her that something else, something deeply personal, weighed on me, and it wasn't about expecting a baby. Right in the middle of dinner, she revealed the elaborate lie she had been weaving. Out from her hiding spot in the kitchen, she produced a brand new baby onesie. She held it up for everyone to see, beaming with excitement, and made her grand announcement about my supposed pregnancy. Instantly, the entire room erupted with congratulations and well wishes, everyone turning to me and my husband, smiling and wanting to celebrate. At that moment, something inside me snapped. I'd reached my limit. I stood up and addressed everyone, making sure my voice was loud and clear above the chaos. "I'm not pregnant," I told them, my words firm. I explained that for days, I had been telling my mother the truth, that I was not expecting a child. I told them I had another matter weighing on me, something I'd wanted to keep private until after the holidays were over. But since my mother insisted on making us share news and express what we were grateful for right then and there, I decided it was my turn. With my heart pounding, I looked around at my family and said I was grateful for my loving, supportive husband, grateful that he stood by my side while I faced a cancer scare and prepared for impending surgery. I told them how much it meant to have someone who actually listened to me, respected my wishes, and never tried to speak over me, especially when it came to my own health. I was grateful, I said, for not just his presence, but his discretion, because unlike my mother, he actually understood why some personal things had to stay private. After that, I couldn't bear to stay at the table any longer. I stood, excused myself, and left. My husband hurried after me, holding me close as we drove home. My tears came in waves, the shock, the embarrassment, the pain of having my boundaries steamrolled once again by my own mom. When we finally got home, I dissolved into sobs. I let it all out, then turned off my phone and tried to focus on preparing for the surgery ahead, determined not to let anything else distract, or stress, me. The surgery went well. The surgeons removed the tumor and, thankfully, it was benign, but the tumor's size and how much it had become a part of my uterus meant I needed a partial hysterectomy. They removed my uterus and fallopian tubes but left my ovaries. When I woke up after surgery, I realized my life had just fundamentally changed. I could no longer carry biological children. As I recovered at home, the sting of my mother's actions gnawed at the back of my mind. I began to wonder, was I too harsh in how I called her out in front of everyone? Was I wrong to embarrass her as she embarrassed me? My husband has been unwavering, insisting I did the right thing, that I had tried so many times in my life to set a clear boundary with my mom about sharing my personal news, but she refused to respect it. According to him, my boundary was justified, and her consistent disregard wasn't my fault. Deep down I know he's right, but guilt lingers. I love my mom, and I find myself wanting to reach out, to pick up the phone and try to find a way forward, but I have no idea what to say. Does this make me the asshole? Update 1. Stop telling me my mom is horrible. Yes, there have been negative moments, but those incidents, while difficult, are just minor shadows in the vast landscape of all the wonderful things my mom has done for me. She might not be a perfect parent, but never once did she make me feel unloved or unwanted. When I lost my dad and found myself crying almost every day, she held me through every single tear. When I lost my dog, she held me again. She was there when I had my heart broken by my first boyfriend. She attended every single basketball game I played, never missed a special event in my life, whether it was at school or within my social life. She supported me through college, asking nothing in return. When I was pulling my hair out over planning my wedding, she went above and beyond to help me find the perfect venue. She always took care of me when I was sick or injured, dropping everything to make sure I was okay. Her generosity didn't stop with me either. She once gave shelter to a friend of mine who was in an unsafe family situation, doing so without expecting anything in return. My mom is the kind of person who, when she sees someone in need of protection, will step in without a second thought. As if that weren't enough, she volunteers at the local animal shelter, taking extra time to care for the cats and dogs who need some extra love. She did something terrible, yes, but that mistake does not define her as a terrible person. I'm not about to go no contact over this. Some people seem to think they understand the full depth of my relationship with my mom based on one negative situation. But after finally working up the nerve to confront her about her behavior, I'm not just going to sever our relationship. If she doesn't change, I won't confide in her again, but I will not cut her completely out of my life. She did reach out to me, and she did apologize. The day after my surgery, she sent flowers to my hospital room with an apology card and followed it up with a text. She admitted she was way out of line and should have listened to me. She promised from now on she will be better at listening to what I say, and I'm willing, for now, to give her the benefit of the doubt and a second chance. Right now, my recovery is going well. I still have some pain throughout my abdomen, mostly around the incision site, but I haven't had any infections or negative side effects, and there have been no complications after surgery. My husband has been taking such good care of me. His parents stop by, help with errands, make sure I'm resting, and keep me company while I spend all day recovering on the couch. My mom stopped by, too, bringing my favorite cheesecake to brighten things up, and she seems genuinely apologetic for her previous words and actions. To everyone who has shared stories about having to go through a similar surgery, I honestly draw hope from you. Knowing that others have gone through this and are thriving makes me feel positive that now that the surgery's over, and that stubborn tumor is finally out of my body, I'll get to start feeling like my old self again. All your advice hasn't gone unheard, and I do want to have a real conversation with my mom, one that's more person to person than mother and daughter, about respecting boundaries. It's clear since my dad died and with extended family living out of state, my mom has enmeshed herself deeply in my life. I see that now, and I'm ready to gently but firmly draw some new lines so we can have a healthier relationship going forward. Update 2. My surgeon cleared me for a short outing, so I drove over to her house in the late afternoon, when the light in her kitchen always turns everything gold. I went in ready to talk like a grown-up, not a kid being managed. Before I even knocked, I saw it through the cracked garage door, a flattened yard sign and a cardboard sleeve with a cartoon stork on it. It looked new. It looked like it had never made it into the ground. When I stepped into the kitchen, she noticed me glance at the garage and went pink immediately. She walked over, slid the door open the rest of the way, and hauled the thing out like she was turning herself in. I bought it the week before Thanksgiving, she said, plain and shaky all at once. I never put it out. I was going to, and then I didn't. I've been meaning to return it. She leaned it against the recycling bin and came back to the table. Her hands were empty. I think that mattered. We didn't dance around anything. I told her I love her. I told her I feel like a news channel she thinks she's allowed to syndicate. I told her I don't want to be managed or narrated. She swallowed hard and told me something I didn't expect. She had made a private Facebook group a month ago for friends who love me because, in her words, she was lonely and wanted company and being excited about me. She called it Nana Countdown. My stomach fell into my shoes. She said there were 73 people in it. There was a pause where I didn't know if I was going to throw up or cry or both. Then she said she deleted it that morning, along with every post, and that she'd posted a message to everyone telling them she'd crossed a line and asking them not to ask me any questions, ever, about pregnancy or babies. She handed me her phone so I could read it myself. It was short and mortifying and honest. She didn't ask me to forgive her while I was looking at it. She just let me sit with the fact that she made it and that it was gone. Right then, like the universe knew we needed a pop quiz, her doorbell chimed. 2 women from her church were on the porch holding a foil-covered casserole and a pair of crocheted booties with little wooden buttons. You could feel all 3 of us freeze at the same time. One of them started to say congratulations and my mom put her hand up, gentle, but up, and said, "I'm the one who created a rumor. My daughter is not pregnant. She had major surgery and she's healing. Please don't ask her about any of it." She looked at me before she said my daughter and I nodded, because we just agreed we would have a clear script. If she needed to shut something like that down, she could tell the basic truth with my permission, but the details were mine. The women were startled, awkward, kind. They handed me the casserole anyway and tucked the booties back into their tote, their eyes soft with apology. When the door closed, my mom leaned on it and started crying, quiet, shoulder-shaking sobs that had nothing to do with being caught and everything to do with finally telling a story that didn't make her the hero. We did our part next. We wrote it down. Not a contract, just a paragraph on an index card stuck under her magnet shaped like a clay cat she made in a pottery class. If I'm told something, I must ask before I share. If someone else asks about it, I will say, that's not mine to tell. If I slip, I will fix it in the same volume I broke it. It sounds simple written here, but it felt like a mountain in the kitchen. Before I left, she brought out a cedar chest from her bedroom and opened it on the rug. Inside were my baby things, my hospital bracelet, a yellow knitted hat, a tiny dress with strawberries. She told me she hadn't opened it in years. She said pretending she might open it for someone else someday had kept her from really opening it for herself. We didn't take anything out. We just sat there with the smell of cedar and old cotton and both of us cried like people who are finally telling the truth to each other even when it isn't flattering. 2 days later, she asked if she could come with me to my post-op appointment. I told her no. I told her I wanted it to be just me and my husband. She said okay. No bargaining, no little sighs. My surgeon went over the pathology again, benign fibroid, no evidence of anything scary lurking in the tissue they sent to the lab. He warned me that my hormones might wobble and I might feel bone tired for a while. He cleared me to take short walks. On the drive home, my husband and I drove past the animal shelter, and I asked him to pull in. The lobby smelled like bleach and biscuits. In the second kennel was a scruffy, old, 3-legged terrier with a graying muzzle sitting perfectly still like he'd been practicing for us. He cocked his head when I said hello. His name card said Biscuit and that he'd been surrendered because of owner's circumstances. That phrase always breaks me. We came back the next day with a bed and a leash and the kind of patience you reserve for anything fragile, and Biscuit came home with us. It was the first time since surgery I felt my body make room for something without a lick of pain. I texted my mom a photo of Biscuit asleep across my lap and asked, "Can we try a pilot program on being a grandma?" She called me, immediately, and I could hear her smiling in the first second. The most remarkable part is what happened next. She asked if she could share the photo. She asked. I said yes, to her sister, and yes, to her best friend, and no, please, not on Facebook. Copy that, she said, and then actually repeated my yeses and nos back to me like she was double-checking dosages. Later that night she texted, "He's very handsome. What does a grand dog call me?" I texted back, "Margaret," and she sent a laughing emoji and said, "Right. Margaret it is." We also tried something bigger. She agreed to see a family counselor with me. 2 sessions in, we learned that the word boundaries had always sounded to her like go away, even when that's not what I was saying. She said she spent my childhood trying to get me seen and celebrated because she didn't want me to feel like my life had shrunk after Dad died. Somewhere in her brain, doing that out loud became equal to loving me. The counselor asked her to imagine what love looks like if it's shaped like a fence instead of a megaphone. My mom sat with that for a very long time and then said, "A fence keeps things safe without shouting." It was corny, and it was also the first time I saw her agree to a metaphor that didn't make her the savior. We came up with a word for anything I tell her that has to go in the vault: bluebell. If I say bluebell, it means she doesn't even bring it up to me unless I bring it up first. It feels goofy when I say it out loud, and it also works. She used it this week on her own. She was about to ask me a follow-up question about my incision, stopped herself mid-sentence, and said, "Is that bluebell?" I said yes. She nodded, changed the subject, and offered me the last clementine in the bowl. There was a moment I didn't expect at my aunt's New Year's lunch. Someone clinked a glass and joked about next year's high chair at the table, and I felt my throat lock. It would have been so easy for my mom to laugh to keep things smooth. She didn't. She said, evenly, "There won't be a high chair for them. Please don't make wishes that hurt." There was a silence that you could feel ripple through the room. She took the silence by the hand and kept going, not performative, not dramatic, just level. "We had a hard month. She's okay. She doesn't owe anyone more information." She looked at me and I gave her the smallest nod, and that was it. No onesies. No theories. No rescue jokes. I don't know how to explain how loud quiet can be until the person who used to fill every quiet space lets it stand. We're not perfect. She texted me a TikTok of someone announcing they were child-free and then rescuing a pair of goats, and it came with about 6 heart emojis in the text, not a suggestion. Just cute. It made me laugh for the right reasons instead of clench for the wrong ones. Yesterday, she showed up at our door with a bag of frozen soups, rang the bell, and left them on the mat because she didn't want to interrupt our nap rotation. Biscuit squeaked like a chew toy that had seen God. She texted from her car, "Bluebell soup drop." It's ridiculous. It's also exactly the shape of love I was trying to ask her for and didn't know how. I don't have a neat bow for this. I'm still sore. Every once in a while, I catch myself reaching for my belly in a way that only makes sense if I'm trying to introduce myself to the body I live in now. My husband keeps cupping my elbow when we step off curbs like my bones are made of spun sugar, and I keep pretending I don't like it when I actually do. My mom mailed the stork sign back. She sent me the UPS tracking number like it mattered, and for us, I think it does. We turned a return receipt into an apology, and an apology into a plan. Update 3. The first warm Saturday in February, the farmer's market woke up like it had been holding its breath all winter. We went because my surgeon said short walks and because Biscuit looked like he'd been rehearsing for a parade. The air was that kind of cold that tastes like pennies until the sun hits it. Clementines at every other stall, their skins piled like tiny suns. We were 2 booths past the honey guy when a woman near the crates went white around the mouth and said, very calmly, "Oh." It was the kind of "oh" you say when you recognize a cliff you didn't mean to be near. Her husband went from casual to frantic in a blink. Someone yelled for an ambulance. Someone else yelled for towels. My husband had 911 on speaker before I even realized I'd knelt in the wet sawdust next to her. "I'm sorry," she kept saying, because people apologize when their bodies do unplanned things in public. The operator's voice was sanded smooth. "If the baby comes, don't pull, just support. You're doing great." The honey guy ripped open a pack of those blue shop towels with his teeth like a pirate. A teenager in a beanie took off his flannel and held it up like a curtain so she had a little privacy between the spinach and the sourdough. Biscuit sat down so suddenly my knee bumped his back and he just leaned against me, solid as a doorstop. Here is the part I don't know how to write elegantly. A baby is an answer your body gives without asking your permission for the question. 1 second the world was cardboard and oranges and a woman's breath counting, and then it was cry. High and outraged and alive. The husband crumpled and said, "Thank you to no one and to everyone." I didn't do anything a dozen strangers couldn't have done, and still, when the EMTs reached us, one of them squeezed my shoulder like he was passing me a baton. "Back. We've got it," he said, and he did. We stood to the side while they bundled mother and baby in confidence and blankets. The honey guy pressed a jar into my hand so fast the label smeared. "On the house," he said. For shock. I walked to the edge of the parking lot and pretended to look for the car. I was trying to breathe around what had just happened without shattering. Not a hole opening inside me, not a pang, something round, like the kind of fullness you get from the right thing at the right time, even if it isn't yours to keep. We told my mom because keeping it in felt like holding a spark in my fist. I called from the passenger seat and said, "Not Bluebell," before I told her anything. I could hear the way she adjusted her whole face on the phone. "Okay," she said. No squeal. No performance. Just, "Are you okay?" Which landed like a warm towel on the back of my neck. I told her we were home, that Biscuit was asleep like a log across my shins, that there was honey sweating on the counter. She asked if she could come by with bagels and then asked again, softer, "Or do you want quiet?" I told her quiet, and she said, "Copy that," and then, after a beat, "Can I tell Aunt Claire the gist?" No social. No group text. I was weirdly grateful she'd asked in the same breath. "Just Claire," I said. No photos. Don't make it a story. Not a story, she echoed, and I could feel both of us hear the weight of those words. It didn't stay tucked. The market has its own gossip loop. On Monday, a reporter from the community paper left a voicemail that said heroic bystanders and human interest. We hadn't given anyone our names. They found my mom because she's on every committee that has a sign-up sheet and the universe has a sense of humor. She texted me before she answered. 2 calls from East Side Beacon. Bluebell? Bluebell, I wrote back. She sent, on it. I listened to her return the call on speaker at her kitchen table under the gold light that makes everything look kind. That's not my story to tell, she said, and then stopped herself from adding anything else. No embellishment, no softening. Please don't contact my daughter. She's healing from surgery and she hasn't consented to being in your paper. There was a pause where you could tell the other person was trying charm, and my mom said, very evenly, fix it in the same volume you ask, which made no sense to the reporter but made sense to us. 3 days later at the animal shelter's blessing of the pets, because the chaplain who volunteers there wears a stole with tiny embroidered paw prints and who wouldn't go for that, we ran into them. The woman from the market was standing near the coffee urns with her baby asleep in a sling, the smallest hat in the world tucked under her chin. She recognized me the way faces do when your body remembers someone's voice. We did that wide-eyed smile people do when there's no script. She introduced me to her son. August, she said, and the name made a little click in my head like a lock turned. I asked if she was okay. She said she was mostly sort of laughing because apparently she'd given birth between a sign that said arugula 2 for $5 and a crate of nectarines. I told her the honey guy had comped my emotional support jar and we both cracked up a little too loud. She asked, carefully, if we could take a photo together for her memories, not for posting. She asked. I said yes, and she handed the phone to my husband and then turned to my mom and said, would you take one with us too? You shut the lady from the Beacon down on my behalf and I haven't met you yet. My mom blinked like she'd stepped somewhere without expecting a step and then smiled in a way I haven't seen on her in years, like she's pleased and not performing. Only if you send it to yourself and not me, she said, and everybody laughed at how weird and wonderful that sentence sounded out loud. After the blessing, we went back to my mom's because the bagels she'd deferred on Saturday were waiting in a paper bag on the counter with a note that said fresh this morning. No surprise visitors. She'd printed the index card, the one with a little paragraph about asking before telling, and taped it to her fridge like a magnet's cousin. It was absurd and perfect. She made tea and slid a tiny dish of honey toward me like she was setting down medicine. I told her the woman's baby's name, and my mom whispered, August, like she was saying amen. She didn't ask anything else. The only patch of wild in all of this was a package that showed up on our porch that same afternoon addressed to me, no return address, heavy. Inside were 12 crocheted baby hats in different pastels and a card in shaky cursive, for the market miracle, girl. I sat on the stairs with a lap full of tiny circles of kindness I couldn't use and didn't deserve. I called my mom because I didn't know where to put the feeling that came with yarn. She said, I have an idea, and for the first time in this whole saga I didn't brace. We drove to the hospital together, the place where I woke up without a uterus and with my life rearranged but intact, and we gave the hats to the NICU. She did the talking for both of us, the kind that doesn't make a spectacle. A kind stranger sent these. We thought you'd know who to give them to. The nurse took them like you take something important and said, thank you the way people do when they don't know the backstory and don't need to. On the way out, my mom didn't say anything about babies or fate or signs. She reached over, squeezed my hand once, and let go. At home, Biscuit sprawled on the rug with his belly in the air, ridiculous in all the ways that remind you how many kinds of joy there are. My husband came in from the kitchen with a slice of toast slicked with honey, held it to my mouth, and I took a bite because sometimes being cared for looks like eating something sweet without making a speech about it. My phone buzzed. It was my mom, a single B emoji, because she'd remembered the bluebell rule and invented a symbol for a story that's loud and small and safe. Update 4. The email subject line said you have a new close match like it was announcing a sale on socks. I was holding a mug of tea so hot it made my knuckles pink. Biscuit was starfished over my feet like a weighted blanket with eyebrows. I clicked, expecting third cousins with names that sound like old furniture. Instead there was a green bar and the word half-sibling sitting there like it had always been waiting. I didn't stand up. I put the mug down slowly so I wouldn't slosh tea on the keys and ruin the only evidence that my life had just tilted. The name was Rowan. 27. 27 felt like a number you could touch, not a tree or a poem. There was a little message attached, short and careful. Hi. This might be nothing. I'm not trying to be a problem. I was told my biological father never knew I existed. If this is wrong, I'll leave you alone. If it's right, hello. I dialed my mom and said, not Bluebell, before I could chicken out. She didn't guess. She didn't fill the space with anything. Okay, she said. Do you want me in this or on the bench? It was the cleanest question she's ever asked me, and I loved her so specifically in that second it made my throat hurt. Bench for now, I said. Please. Copy, she said, and you could hear the way she wouldn't move if I didn't tell her to. We met at a coffee shop that used to be a post office, the kind with tall windows that make everyone look honest. My husband took Biscuit to circle the block like they were walking the perimeter of a story and I walked in alone. Rowan stood up from a table in the corner and my whole body did that thing where it recognizes a chord before it knows the song. Same half-moon dimple that only shows up on certain smiles. Same way of bracing a hand against the side of a cup with the thumb flat like a little kickstand. When they laughed, too quick, too self-conscious, I had to put my hand on the back of the chair to steady myself because it sounded like the way Dad laughed when he was trying not to wake me up. Rowan's mom had told them the bare bones at 18, a boy she loved, not ready for a life they could have together, no malice, no story about villains, just a fork in the road and the knowledge, repeated, that he didn't know. I don't want anything from you, Rowan said, and the way their fingers tapped twice against the table before they said something important made a film reel start in my head of a man I know and don't know doing that exact tap. I just thought if all I ever do is say hello to the person who shares some of my face, it would be something. We compared facts like we were assembling a puzzle we weren't going to force to fit. Their mom had saved a photo of my dad from a distance. Letterman jacket, too big, grin like he'd just gotten away with a joke. I showed Rowan the picture of him at the pumpkin patch where he's kneeling behind me and doing that dad thing of pretending to be a monster while being careful not to actually scare me. We didn't cry. We both looked like we might and then we didn't. Rowan stirred sugar into their coffee with their left hand. So did my dad. So do I. I FaceTimed my mom at the end from the sidewalk so she could stand in the doorway of the bench if she wanted. Hi, she said, and then, I'm Margaret, like she was trying on a hat that fit and didn't pretend to be a crown. Rowan smiled with their mouth and their eyes, both. Hi, Margaret, they said, and my mom blinked 3 times, slow, like a person learning how to be underwater and okay. We planned nothing huge. We planned one thing. Rowan asked if I ever went to visit the spot with Dad's name on it. I said sometimes I drive and sit in the car for 10 minutes like a coward, eat a clementine, and then leave the peel under the tree like an offering from a kid who doesn't know the rules. Rowan said that sounded perfect. We picked a day with a sky that looked like copy paper. I texted my mom. Not Bluebell. You can come if you can be small. She sent back a single B and then nothing else. The 3 of us are not cinematic together yet. It's not a montage. It's 3 people walking across grass that squishes water up around your shoes because it snowed and then didn't. My mom carried bluebells in a jar because she can't help herself and also because it made sense. There was no speech. There was a little talk. I said his name. Rowan said, "Hi, Dad," so quietly it made the wind sound loud. My mom set the jar down and put her hand on the stone and then took it away like she'd caught herself reaching for a stove burner. She didn't narrate. She didn't try to make it mean anything it didn't. We all stood there long enough that my toes started to tingle and Biscuit, who had been very serious the entire time, sneezed once like a punctuation mark. On the way back to the car, Rowan asked, with the same careful voice they'd used in the first message, "Can I meet you, just you, Margaret, another day?" My mom said, "If you want to, and then, only if you have someone who can come with you. I am a lot in a small space." And then she laughed in a way that let both of them step around it instead of into it. Here's the only part where the universe tried to test us with slapstick. Someone from the old Nana group, because the internet is a ghost town that never actually empties, saw me tagged in a photo of a clementine and thought they were being cute and commented a baby emoji and a stork on a public post that had nothing to do with anything. It took exactly 4 minutes for my mom to get there, not with a flamethrower, but with a watering can. "I created a rumor once," she wrote. "I asked everyone to stop. Please don't leave footprints on what you don't understand." Then she DM'd me a screenshot and asked, "Too much?" I wrote back, "Just right." She left it. She didn't make it about herself. She didn't send a follow-up. The quiet did the work for her. Rowan came over for dinner a week later. Nothing special, pasta, a salad that was mostly croutons because my husband thinks the vegetable on the label counts as compliance. Biscuit made the same woo-woo sound he reserves for people he decides to adopt on site. We put the cedar chest on the rug and opened it together for the first time since that day in my mom's house. I warned Rowan beforehand. "We don't have to touch anything," I said. "We can just look and close it again." Rowan reached for the tiny yellow hat and then didn't. "Not because I don't want to," they said. "Because sometimes wanting is a nice enough verb by itself." My mom brought out an envelope I hadn't seen. It was the kind that looks like it's been in a book for a long time. Inside were 3 Polaroids of my dad as a kid holding kittens, all elbows and grin. One had a smudge of chocolate on the corner like it had been in the same room as a birthday. "I forgot these existed," she said, and then, "Rowan, would you like one?" Not because she was performing generosity, but because she understood scarcity and didn't want to keep everything in a box that only breathed when she opened it. We took a picture that night. Rowan asked. My mom said, "For you, not for posting." We all laughed because our lives have turned into a call and response where permission is a kind of music. I stood between someone who is my father's dimple and someone who has learned how to keep her voice the size of the room. I looked like a person who didn't expect any of this and was trying my best to meet it without flinching. There will be messy parts. Rowan's mom wants to meet my mom and also wants not to, in the way grief and protection wrestle and then sit on opposite ends of the same couch. The day after dinner, a cousin, I didn't know she was mine until last week, found me through the site and sent a message that said, "I'm so glad you found each other. There's a part of me that wants to dunk my phone in a bowl of honey and make it too sticky to answer anything at all. There's a part of me that can feel something unlatching very gently in my chest, no rush of air, just a small click that says there's another door in this house I didn't know I had the key for. Before we went to bed, my mom texted a bee and a sprout. Then, 5 minutes later, because she's still herself under all this new tenderness, she sent, "Is it okay if I plant actual bluebells by the rock next time, or is that against cemetery rules and my whole personality?" I told her I'd call and ask the office in the morning. She sent back, "Copy that." Asking before digging feels like a good metaphor. For once, we all slept without rehearsing a speech for the morning. The house felt like a place where the quiet could be loud and kind at the same time.